I suggest we start now.
Right, then let's start. On behalf of the Rail Enthusiast Society of India, let me extend a very warm welcome to all the participants and a special welcome to those of you who have joined from overseas. I see there are a number of participants from the United Kingdom and from Australia. So welcome. It is indeed a rare privilege to have so many participants in our monthly talk. Now we have been having these talks regularly for the last, I think, 17 months. And the attendance in most of these talks has been fairly good. I will now request JL to introduce our speaker, who is a former railwayman. He served the railways for a long time, then worked with RITES, and has a lot of experience on railways, the Indian railways, as other railway systems outside the Indian railway network, which is an interesting topic, and I hope all of you will enjoy it. JL, it's all yours.
Thank you, Vinu. It is my privilege to present to you today Mr. Sushil Kumar Luthra, who has been a professional railwayman all his life and retired not too long back as the Chief Administrative Officer of the Diesel Maintenance Works at Patiala. Among his many assignments that he had while he was with the Indian Railways is the deputation to RITES. Now, RITES Limited, among the many things that it does, is to operate and maintain systems of the railways which are outside the Indian Railways. And we have with us today Sushil Luthra, who was head of this division, which does this work with RITES. So I will not come between you and Sushil Luthra. And I hand over to you, Mr. Luthra, for giving us your presentation.
Good morning, friends. Very hearty welcome to all of you to this talk. Let me first share my screen so that yes, just a minute.
Yeah, we manage it.
Is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah.
Okay. So friends, my name is Sushil Luthra. I retired from the railways about 4 years back. Been on the railways all my life. Had the privilege of representing Indian Railways in the embassy in Paris for 4 or 5 years, which gave me good visibility of the other railway systems outside India. And in between this stint with RITES, which is an arm of the railways itself, but still in a different position and gives you a different outlook to how things happen. So when Mr. JL Singh approached me for doing a talk, I could not quite decide what to speak on. So I decided to speak of less known railway systems in India, which are outside the gaze of the normal Indian railway network. I should, correctly speaking, have named this talk as less known railway systems in India rather than unknown railway systems. But Mr. JL Singh asked me to give him the title a few days in advance. So I was committed to this title and I didn't change this. So I'm going to speak about this is what I'm going to cover in my talk. I'm first going to cover some of the merry-go-round railways, which are outside the Indian Railways network, but basically in powerhouses of the NTPC, National Thermal Power Corporation, which produces almost a fourth of the total power in India. And there are small merry-go-round systems in National Aluminium Company and a new Reliance Cement plant, of which I'm aware of. There might be a few more. So the first part of the talk will be on these merry-go-round systems, how they work, how the railway supports them, how RITES supports them. The second part will be about the railway yards in integrated steel plants in the country, which have a huge railway network and depend on rail-based movement for their entire needs. Then I'll come to a third part, which is a recent development. The coming up of new private railways in India, which have been mostly a result of trying to improve port connectivity to the hinterland, to the existing railway network in India. For ports, the evacuation is very, very important. And sometimes they face problems in expanding or utilizing the full capacity for the lack of good connectivity to the railway system. And in the end, I will cover how RITES Rail Equipment Services Division has actually supported all these initiatives, and how their new loco leasing business is also now playing a very important role in all of this. So I move on. So the merry-go-round systems of the NTPC was an innovation when NTPC came into being sometime in the 1973-74, when India's economy started growing and the need for electricity increased. And coincidentally, at about the same time, RITES was also being set up, with the railways, expanding, having difficulty in meeting all its all the demands made on it. So it decided to form a company which would be basically a window for helping people outside the railway in setting up and supporting the railway systems. This was also for many African countries where there were huge demands for railway personnel and railway expertise. Indian Railways thought that this would be better done through a separate company. So both RITES and NTPC were almost born at the same time in the mid-70s. And when NTPC, which was a totally indigenous effort, there was no foreign collaboration to set up these NTPC power plants. And these two organizations worked together to design this merry-go-round system. The first such plant was Singrauli, followed by Ramagundam and then a host of others. So over the last half a century, almost NTPC has about 20-25 power plants, out of which about 10-12 have this merry-go-round system. So the merry-go-round system theoretically is totally independent of the Indian Railways. The plant has a looped track between the mines. These are all mine head power plants. The NTPC conceptually was a mine head power plant arrangement. So the one end of the loop is in the mine and the other end of the loop is in the power plant. And both ends have a bulb through which this non-stop train carrying coal moves. Of course, since they have to depend sometimes and most of the time actually for supplementing their coal requirements from the Indian Railway network also. So this yard is somehow connected to the Indian Railway network. But theoretically, if the mines are working to full capacity, they don't need to take coal from the Indian Railway network and they can sustain themselves. At least initially, they were able to sustain themselves. And as they expanded and increased their generating capacity, some coal started coming from the Indian Railway network also.
Let me talk to this fellow first because he has to complete the work, no? अगर उसने cleaning नहीं की है तो clean करेगा और सब.
I request everybody to mute themselves. I request all participants to mute themselves.
Okay.
So these merry-go-round systems, they have a coal loading silo at the dedicated mine head bulb and an unloading point into conveyors at the coal handling bulb. The whole operation is fully automated and non-stop. And the one locomotive with about 35 to 40 hopper wagons, it keeps on rotating in this bulb And that's how this system works. I'll show some photographs. Unfortunately, I could not get very good photographs, but still to give you some idea. And all these assets are owned by NTPC and maintained by their own staff, and some places supported by RITES. And RITES in turn employs a lot of retired IR technical workers and supervisors to do this work, because it's very difficult to get serving employees from the Indian Railways to RITES. So it's a very convenient arrangement, a low-cost arrangement for NTPC to maintain this. So this is the coal loading silo of a MGR system. The coal is carried from the pits through a conveyor to the top of the silo. The silo gets filled up, and the train you can see moving below, and it continuously moves out through the silo with the coal loaded. And this is not a very good photograph, but you can, if your resolution is good, you can see that coal dropping into the wagons, into the silo, in the silo. Then in the unloading point is called the coal handling plant, where you can see the locomotive in front and then the wagons behind. And as it will go through the shed ahead of it, through a sensor, the wagon's location will be found, and then the wagon will empty out automatically into the conveyor below, and the conveyor will carry it to stacks from where it will move into the powerhouse. So this is about the merry-go-round systems of NTPC. So these are about, each of them have about 60, 70 locomotives working in the, 6 to 7 or 10 locomotives working in each plant, and about 200-300 wagons. And these belong to NTPC and they are maintained there. And it's a totally closed loop system supporting the powerhouse. There have been efforts in the past by Indian Railways to take over these systems, but NTPC have very stoutly resisted this attempt, because they think that they have a lot of autonomy in keeping the system like this. And they have their own way of improving this and modernizing these, which they do from time to time. However, the locomotives all come from the Indian Railways manufacturers, DLW, and they are almost the same locomotives used on Indian Railways. So there's no problem of parts and things. So the second part is about the maze of railway yards in integrated steel plants. Steel Authority of India Limited started setting up integrated steel plants sometime in the 60s. And these plants were set up, the first one was set up in Rourkela with foreign collaboration. I think it was German collaboration, followed by Bhilai and Durgapur, which were set up with Russian collaboration. And Bokaro also perhaps with Russian collaboration. And these started making India self-sufficient for steel. Then TISCO in Jamshedpur also came in the private sector. Later on, Rashtriya Ispat Nigam Limited in Visakhapatnam and Indian Iron and Steel Company in Burnpur came up. And very recently, the Tata Steel mega plant at Kalinganagar in Odisha and JSW's plants in Chhattisgarh, etc. have come up. So as we understand, the entire inward movement of the iron ore, coal, etc., and the outward movement of finished steel predominantly takes place on rail. So they have huge exchange yards to receive and dispatch rakes with the Indian railway system. And even a lot of internal movement from shop to shop when after the pouring, very small movements, maybe 400, 500 meters at a time. Those movements also take place by rail. And that's how these steel plants have been designed. That a rail goes right up to the furnaces, and the steel is poured, hot steel is poured into the ladles while they are standing on a wagon. So ranging from 100 HP to full force 4000 HP locomotives are required in these steel plants. And they have a large variety of locomotives, unlike NTPC, while they have mostly DLW built locomotives, but they have a large number of smaller locomotives also of variety of makes. And these one can these locations are really a real enthusiast's delight if one were to go there and find these small foreign locomotives still working. And any locomotive which has been made in India or imported into India, you will be able to find some part of it in these places. I talked to people there and I learned that 10 Russian locos are still in operation in Bhilai. These are very small locomotives, capable of just pulling small 1 wagon, 2 wagons consignment for internal movement inside the steel plant. And even Rourkela has one old GE locomotive. I've got some pictures in the subsequent slides also, but I wish I could have got some more. But I tried, and whatever I could get, I have put up. But I would request our RES members to go deeper into this and discover some of these heritage points. SAIL and TISCO, both they had initially set up their own maintenance facilities. They were almost equivalent to a diesel loco shed, equivalent of a diesel loco shed on Indian Railways. They mimicked the entire diesel shed facilities inside their premises. But as the time went on, they expanded. They had pressure on costs and on manpower. So they started depending on RITES to help them out. And now one can see RITES working in many of these locations, including some of these RITES leased locos in use in steel plants. In the last round of modernization, going along with what is happening on the Indian Railways, all these yards have been electrified also. But because of the lot of sidings which are non-electrified, they continue to work with diesels. Of course, the incoming locos from Indian Railways bring the rakes by electric. But after that, all the internal movement and shifting of the rakes and wagons to different parts of the steel of the yard, that happens with diesel locos. So it's a predominantly still a diesel loco operation. This is a first GE loco of the Rourkela steel plant, which is available inside their park. One can go and see this and get more details. This is another GE locomotive, similar, but a little larger, I think, still in operation at Rourkela. This is a Russian locomotive, which is out of use now in Bhilai steel plant yard. This is inside their shed. This is functional, one of the functional locomotives there. So the steel is the other second part of extensive railways happening in India, but outside the Indian Railways. And RITES becomes the bridge between them and the Indian Railways for supporting them. So now I move on to the third part, the recent developments. Sometime in, I think, 80 or so, the first private port was set up in India, the Pipavav port. This was based on the proposal by a private company to set up their own port. So Gujarat Pipavav Port Limited was formed along with the Ministry of Shipping. And as an offshoot of that, the Pipavav Railway Corporation Limited was set up, which was a 50-50 participation between Indian Railways and the Gujarat Pipavav Port Limited. Now this, there was a meter gauge line, not leading up to the port, but close by. And the project, the shipping company, the Sea King Infrastructure Limited, who formed the joint venture with Indian Railways to set up this GPPL, they funded the project, and the meter gauge line was converted and extended to the port. And this very first private private port connectivity railway line, railway company rather, has been operational since the last 20, 25 years, and is now a profit-making company since the last 10 years. And it lifts about 10 million tons of traffic every year, and mostly container traffic, but also some bulk transport happens here also. Of course, its fortunes keep on fluctuating in line with the export-import traffic, which is at the moment not at its peak. But this was the first example of a private railway system on the Indian Railways. Indian Railways, being a joint venture partner, did not give them the full freedom. For example, the track work was done by the railway companies, by IRCON, and the rolling stock also mostly is Indian Railway rolling stock. But now with private container companies also operating, some other private rakes also go there. And recently, Pipavav Rail Corporation itself has leased out some rakes to evacuate the containers from there. So this is the pioneer in this field of new private railways happening in India. Not very well publicized or well known outside the railway system. And traditionally, the CMD of this corporation has been a retired railwayman, and Sanjeev Garg presently heads this corporation. So it does not have many of its own assets. The track belongs to them, but the rolling stock moving on it is Indian Railway rolling stock or private container rolling stock. But it pays to the railways the track maintenance charges and charges from its customers, and is able to do a decent business. Now, this was after the success of this Pipavav Railway. The same concept was tried to be emulated. And by this time, Indian Railways felt that it's not correct for them to directly hold a stake into a private company. So they authorized the Rail Vikas Nigam Limited, which was a public sector organization under the Indian Railway umbrella, to set up these special purpose vehicles. So over the last 15 odd years, 20 years, these 6 special purpose vehicles have come up. I'll just go through them one by one. So the Kutch Railway Company Limited, it's a 300-kilometer line. It is also a gauge conversion project conceived in 88, 89. And it was extended to the Kandla and Mundra ports at Adani's cost. And here Adani is the main joint venture partner, although there are many other shareholders also. And RVNL, on behalf of Indian Railways, owns about, I think, 35-40% of the stake, and rest is held by private companies. And beyond the Kutch Railway line, is there a private connection by Adani's connecting to the ports. And as we all know, perhaps, Kandla and Mundra are one of the biggest private ports presently, and contributing tremendously to the development of port traffic. Similarly, a Bharuch Dahej Railway Company Limited was set up. This also had, this was a gas terminal. Dahej is a gas terminal of certain oil companies. And this was set up in 65 kilometers. And Adani, Petronet and some others have a stake in this. Here also RVNL has the major part of the stake. So as you can see, both these along with Pipavav were in Gujarat. So Gujarat state was the pioneer in facilitating these projects. It's not very easy to see these projects through from the concept to the finalization. But the first 3 projects you can see were in the state of Gujarat, and they are working quite satisfactorily. I am not sure. Kutch Railway, of course, made a lot of money and is a profitable venture. It is now being doubled and electrified. out of its own savings. Again, the model is that it is paid for by this company, but the construction work is supervised by the Indian Railways. And that is to ensure that the uniform standards are maintained, and it's easy also for implementation. Although private contractors might be getting used from place to place. I am not very much aware of that. But the basic concept is that the project work is handed over to the Indian Railways. I think RVNL also has an interest in that to do it itself. So that may be also a reason why this model is continuing. Then the Krishnapatnam Railway Company is also port connectivity, but in Andhra or Telangana, I'm not sure. So the port itself is also a shareholder, and there are other shareholders. Then the next two, the Haridaspur Paradeep Railway Company and the Angul Sukinda Railway Company, these are not port, well, Haridaspur Paradeep is partly port connectivity, but these two are mainly to facilitate small steel plants in Odisha who need connectivity. So these steel plants have got together and funded these projects. And in Angul Sukinda, Concor is a shareholder along with RVNL. And in Haridaspur, Paradeep Port is a shareholder also. And Sagarmala Development Company is a company promoted by the Government of India for connecting the ports to each other by rail. So government and private shareholders are there. So these are good vehicles where private interests and public interests have been brought together.
We have a cover for the next 3-4 days. उसके बाद में देखते हैं.
So then the last one is the Digi Roha Rail Limited. This is a very, very new development. This was sanctioned in 15-16, but the work is yet to start. This is the Digi port is near Goa and links to the Konkan Railway and Central Railway. Recently, this port has been purchased over by Adani's, and we hope that the work will start soon on this. Now, based on the success of these special purpose vehicles of setting up private railways, of course, all freight based, the RITES and IRCON were also encouraged by the Ministry of Railways to get into this sector. So they also have now MOUs with many state governments, Coal India and other stakeholders to facilitate such projects, connectivity projects. So now this is like becoming a storm, and these two PSUs also are getting into a large number of projects outside the Indian Railways, building small connecting lines from what the state governments want and which Railways is not able to accommodate in its budget are being done like this. So these all become bankable projects. Part of the funds are raised from banks, and part of the equity is provided by the private partners and RVNL. So it's a very smooth and mutually beneficial arrangement which is happening in the country. And these new private railways are now expected to flourish soon. Now, in 2015, further development happened on these lines. The Ministry of Shipping has taken the initiative, and it has set up the Indian Port Rail and Ropeway Corporation Limited in 2015. And this is a joint venture company between 11 major ports under the Ministry of Shipping. Major ports are ports which are basically government ports, and minor ports are, that is the nomenclature. The private ports are called minor ports, although some of the minor ports are now major ports in size. So the Ministry of Shipping holds a very big stake in this. And RVNL is the railway connection, providing the railway overlap. So this, again, the same effort is being made in a more organized manner with efficient rail evacuation systems to major ports and for enhancing their capacity and throughput. But this has been a major bone of contention between the Ministry of Shipping and the Ministry of Railways, both accusing or blaming each other of holding back the expansion and development of ports. Railways feels that wherever they have made the investments, there's no return on the investment, and ports want certain investments to be made by the railways, which were not forthcoming. So again, this is a way of resolving this issue. And with IPRCL is now a reality. And if you visit their site, you will find that they already have about 100 port railway augmentation projects and more than 30 ropeway projects. Ropeways can be very useful ways of bulk traffic evacuation from the ships or from to close by customers or to the yard. So this is a very, very interesting development. Lot of ex-railway employees or the managers, they find employment in this corporation. And they very often use rights for consultancy, for project management of railway-related assets. And I'm sure as we go along, they will also use the rights services for locomotives and other things, similar to what we have seen for the steel plants and the power stations. An interesting story on this is that long back in about in the late 80s or early 90s, or maybe a little later, sorry, when the Mumbai JNPT was getting clogged with container traffic was picking up in the country. And the Ministry of Shipping had proposed to the government of India of setting up their own railway line from Mumbai to Delhi for a dedicated freight corridor to basically aimed at efficient evacuation of containers from JNPT and to be in line with the expansions happening there. And I have this from some reliable sources who were in the ministry at that time, that there was quite a tussle between the Ministry of Shipping and Ministry of Railways in doing this project. Finally, the Ministry of Railways, which was very, very powerful, did not allow Ministry of Shipping to go ahead with their proposal. And finally, that's how the DFC projects were born or conceptualized. And then Railways instituted studies and then loans, etc. And that's how the Western DFC and then the Eastern DFC also came along. So there is this story which I don't know whether how true this is, but this I have it from very authoritative sources who were in the Ministry of Shipping at that time. So now coming to the, just one more aspect I would like to add. You must have read about initiatives by state governments. For example, Kerala is trying to build a private railway system. Then Karnataka is trying to build certain private railway systems connecting their outer areas to Bangalore. Then we have initiatives to connect Delhi to Meerut, Delhi to Alwar, etc. The NRTC, CTC initiatives, which is a reality. So these are also happening outside the Indian Railway network. But there is no private involvement. This is basically a government initiative only. And so outside the Indian Railways, a lot of things are happening. And I'm still not touching upon the metro systems, which after building the first metro in Calcutta by Indian Railways, all other metro systems have been constructed outside Indian Railways, of course, using their expertise, their people, and rights initial expertise in the whole thing. So to sum it up, a lot is happening in the railway outside the railway system, but not very visible to the outside eye. That is why the less known railway systems in India. So our last part is about the role played by RITES. So as we saw, it started with loco and wagon maintenance support at NTPC, Farakka, Kelgaon and Talcher plants. This was way back in 1980 or so. Then they expanded into operations, track maintenance, studies and project reports for expansion. Gradually, more NTPC plants got added. Other state power plants, NALCO, steel plants, ports, they got added. I joined RITES in 2005. And at that time, we were doing these jobs, which I have described above, valued. It was not a very high level work, but we were doing about 5, 6, 7 crores worth of services to these companies together. We had a sizable 200 people team at the sites. In 2007 or so, I was on a visit to Calcutta to one of our customers, the Calcutta Electric Supply Corporation. They had a unique problem that they were dependent on the Sialda division of Eastern Railway to provide them a shunting locomotive. It was a lease arrangement where the Indian Railways would give them a locomotive and along with the driver, etc., and do their job and go back after spending 8-10 hours in the day. It would return to the Sialda shed, or it would stay sometimes for a full week. So my customer, we were doing some other jobs for them. So they said that we are very unhappy with this arrangement because the loco will come late or the driver will start work at per his convenience. And we don't know what to do and get out of this. Now, I had worked on the Eastern Railway in Sialda division itself earlier. So I first tried to explore whether we could take this locomotive on lease from Sialda Eastern Railway and then give it on further lease to the customer so that we could provide them a better service experience. But it was very difficult to negotiate the terms with railway. Then we explored that could we buy out an old locomotive from Indian Railways and use it for this work. That also we could not resolve. I spent 1.5 years going to the railway ministry, and what we could not finalize was the price at which they would sell the locomotive to us. The Indian Railways had a very difficult costing system, and we could not arrive at a mutually acceptable cost. So finally, that was also abandoned. And then we came up with a scheme under which we found that a lot of old meter gauge diesel locos were getting condemned on the Indian Railway system. And they were lying all over the place. Some were in good condition, some were in bad condition. So what we did was that we bought out these scrap locomotives from the Indian Railways, used the power pack, the engine, which was the same engine as is used on the shunting locomotives of broad gauge. And we entered into contracts with the Golden Rock workshop in Southern Railway, Parel in Central, Ajmer on Western, and Jamalpur workshop in Eastern Railway to salvage whatever we could salvage from these old meter gauge locomotives, add a new underframe of a broad gauge, and use some old parts of other locomotives, old wheels, old axle boxes, and try to create a loco at half cost. So the first such locomotive was constructed by us at GOC in 2009. The RITES management was very supportive. We gave this idea to the RITES management and they gave us 3 crores. At that time, it was a sizable money. And as I said, it is about 50% of my total turnover of my business unit. So they gave us 3 crores to construct such a second-hand locomotive. And my friend Gawane was my second in charge there. And later on, he replaced me when I left RITES. And for the next 10 years, he worked on this very well. And in 10-12 years, this loco leasing business was constructed out of nowhere. And today, it is a very, very important, it plays a very important part in many, many projects in the country, as I will show. So from today, this division works at 60 different private railway sites. It owns and leases about 63 locomotives, maintains so many wagons and locomotives, and is doing a business of about 250 crores per year from about 6 crores in 2005-06 when I first came. And all thanks to the exemplary work done by my colleague Gawane in getting these locomotives constructed in spite of the railway system. The railway system wanted to encourage this, but somehow the bureaucracy would not permit us to work together. So we created these locomotives. Gawane and his team, they created these locomotives. And today, these are the sites where they are supporting the operation maintenance. And the next slide will show you where the local leasing is happening. So as you can see, Dhamra is a private port. Paradip Port is a government port. Gopalpur Port is, I think, private. Visakhapatnam Port, Mumbai, Murgaon Port, Adani Ports in Gujarat. Then all the steel plants, many mines use these locomotives. Then small powerhouses use this. And even on the DFCC, these construction companies have used these locomotives. They find it far, far easier to deal with RITES than to deal with the Indian Railways. And there is a queue of people wanting these locomotives. And this has become the first time that an asset leasing business has been developed in the country of this nature. This is the first locomotive which RITES built. It looks almost, it is actually the same as a WDS-6 locomotive. But in 2009, this was constructed. So this is the first loco of 2009. And since then, they have not looked back. This is a very nice photograph of 3 leased locomotives arriving simultaneously at Dhamra Port. This is a new port. And so with this, I come to the end of my presentation and just want to emphasize that a lot is happening and a lot will continue to happen in the railway system outside the Indian Railways. Of course, a lot is happening inside the Indian Railways also and in the metro systems. But this is a hidden, less known part of what is happening in the Indian Railways. I'll leave you with a photograph which I came across during my research. This is from the NTPC archives. It is perhaps the first WDM-2 locomotive being transported to Singrauli to start this Singrauli NTPC power plant. I thought you would be interested to see this photograph. I'm sure our members can do further research and dig up many, many more aspects of these developments in the private railways. Would like to thank you everybody for listening. I especially want to thank my old colleagues and friends at RITES. I left them long back, but I'm aware of their invaluable contribution in supporting these private railways. My special thanks to Gawane, my erstwhile colleague in this business, Sandeep Mehra, who is presently heading the RES division, and his able assistants, Hemant Kumar and Satish, and some site managers, Amit Guha and Nayak, who have worked with me also and whose help I took in some of the photographs and information. And one Mr. Dhawan, a very old person who retired long back, but who is one of the earliest employees of this wing. I also spoke to one Mr. Satpathy, who was with us when we were working for Rourkela Steel Plant. He is presently as an ED at Rourkela, and he gave me some of the photographs. Thank you very much. Any information anybody needs, I'm available.
Thank you, Mr. Luthra.
Thank you.
I can assure you that apart from people who are not in the railways, most railwaymen are also not aware of the kind of hidden railways that we have outside the system of the Indian Railways. I hope I can be heard.
Yes, yes.
And sir, thank you very much. In fact, the last part about the leasing of locos, although I had worked in RITES myself, I was not aware of the extent of leasing that RITES is doing now. So thank you very much. It was an eye-opener. I'm sure there must be many questions that the listeners would like to ask. Any questions, please?
Okay, I'd like to ask a question.
Sir.
Yeah. Leasing of locos is a very interesting subject. So it just came to my mind, has RITES also considered leasing of wagons? Because you have many organizations which are into aluminium and other similar products which move by rail. And again, they might be quite happy if the RITES gives them leased wagons, and then so they would be much happier dealing with RITES than with Indian Railways.
Sir, no, RITES has not got into wagon leasing. There are two reasons for that. Wagon leasing is basically an investment business, not a maintenance business, as maintenance intensive as locomotives are. So RITES is not really a financial company. And the other development is that a very well-known international company, GATX, has already entered the country for wagon leasing, and they are doing very well. A lot of these container rakes they are leasing, and now other kinds of wagons like steel wagons and autocar wagons also. So GATX is doing a similar wagon leasing business in India. It's an American company and one of the largest leasing companies in the world. So they are here, and RITES is not really into this because it's not into an investment business. It's into a maintenance business, basically.
Mr. Anand, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just a few observations.
Sir.
Sir. See, this Pipavav Railway was first proposed in 1996-97, and the driving force was Sanat Mehta, the MP from Surendranagar. Literally, I was DRM Bhavnagar, and Jindra was DRM Baroda. So, we were told you'll have to pursue this railway board. Other driving force was Mr. Gandhi of the Gujarat Maritime Board. Second observation, Konkan Railway was asked to conduct a survey on the coastal line. That is, right now Konkan Railway is on the eastern side of the Western Ghats, or on top of the Western Ghats. They proposed that if Konkan Railway runs along the coast, a very narrow strip of land between the Western Ghats and the Arabian Sea. And there are a number of minor ports. So they said it will get connected, but the cost was quite prohibitive. And because this alignment was longer, you have to keep skirting the mountain. The DREAM project, which I think maybe under Mr. Modi's guidance, a very old proposal is to link Dahej to Bhavnagar port. It's build a sort of weir, and it's now technically feasible so that the Gulf of Khambat finally becomes a huge freshwater reserve. But that is just still in dreaming stage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the inputs. That's right. Surendranagar MP, I think, was also very instrumental. I have read about that also. So yes, many things happened together, and this became a reality.
Right. Mr. Nayak wanted to ask Mr. Sudhir Ranjan Nayak. You have to unmute yourself.
Sir, namaskar, sir.
Namaskar. Please go ahead with your question or observation.
Sir, being in railway, we are not aware of so many things. But while I was in deputation to rights, at that time I have seen that GE1 locomotive at BTPS Bandel, West Bengal Power Development Corporation. And Luthra Saab has initiated my entry into rights in 2009. And now so many projects I have gone and handled the rights project. Now I am in Bokaro Steel Plant project having 25 loco maintenance and 3 locomotives under leasing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Right, let me make a few observations and first compliment Sushil on a wonderful talk and covering a very wide range of industrial sidings. My observations are basically, I was the first managing director of Bharuch Dahej Railway Company. Yes. I set up the company virtually from scratch. You had sort of painted a fairly rosy picture of the whole thing. We had a lot of problems. Principal problem was that the railways did not create it for the private sector to run these independent railways. They created them primarily to raise finances, to get money for these port connectivity projects. So therefore, we were a company of basically 5 people. We were not allowed to, the railway doesn't allow them to maintain the track, to maintain the wagons, to maintain the signaling, and so on. But in Bharuch Dahej, I somehow did this experiment for 2 years, for 2.5 years, where I had my own gangman, my own signal maintenance staff, my own station staff other than the station master. And it worked out to be very economical because once you post in railway government employees, their salary structure is very high. And the whole thing, the viability becomes questionable because unless the traffic volumes are like on the Kutch Railway. Secondly, the railways has been very reluctant to let go of control, which creates problems for these projects. Over the last decade, I mean, it's almost a decade since I left, there has been a lot of relaxation. Policies are changing, particularly for the new companies that are being set up by RITES and IRCON, which are basically for clearing coal from collieries in Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. I think they have relaxed the rules, so it's more favorable for the private company. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is the biggest industrial sidings perhaps in our rail network are those with the ports, with the old traditional ports. That is, Visakhapatnam was set up in the late 1920s by the railways. It was constructed and managed by the port trust was managed by the railways at that time. And of course, now it will be handed over to the port trust, which is run by the central government. Similarly, the Bombay Port Trust Railway, the Calcutta Port Trust Railway, and so on. So those are also very big networks, although the railway has very little work in it and perhaps RITES is not doing so much with these port trust railways. The third point I want to make, and I'm glad you mentioned it, you were absolutely right in saying, giving us the genesis of the dedicated freight corridor. What had happened, there was the Secretary Shipping at that time. We had this tremendous growth in container traffic. There was a lot of pressure both on road and rail. At that time, the railways was talking about building a high-speed rail corridor between Delhi and Bombay and Ahmedabad. So when this chap said, okay, if you are not going to do it, let me build the railway. The railways then woke up at that time and then tried to scuttle their proposal, which was not very difficult, and went in for this dedicated freight corridor which the Japanese were willing to support. But you are right. It was the motivational force was because the shipping ministry said, if you don't do it, we will do it. So thanks. It's been a wonderful talk.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I have a question. Mr. Luthra, how when you wanted to buy locos and for NTPC and so on, you said there was difficulty costing, but how was that problem resolved, or how was it better if using the meter gauge and then rebuilding a loco using the workshops? I mean, weren't the same costing related issues, or how were they resolved?
Okay. So, when railways try to sell a working locomotive against a condemned locomotive, when they have a locomotive which has outlived its life, what they do is they will strip it of all useful equipment and practically everything will be for scrap. So it's very easy for them to come to a cost because it's all scrap. It's basically the tonnage of iron into it and some non-ferrous material. But when you go to them for a working locomotive, they say, well, in this locomotive A, the engine was replaced 2 years back. And in locomotive B, it was replaced 10 years back. 5 motors are new, 2 are old. This part I replaced some time back. So they get into all these detailing and they cannot arrive at a universal cost to sell an old working locomotive. We were interested in buying a working locomotive, which may be 30 years old and due for modernization or POH, etc. But when they got down to costing, they got into all these detailing issues and could never say that my universal price for a scrap locomotive is, for a working locomotive is say 2. We were looking at a price of about 2 crores. That time a new locomotive would come for 6 crores. So we had worked out our viability for leasing. And we thought that if we can get an old rundown locomotive, which we could improve, for about 2 crores, it would be a viable business. Now, they would not give a price. They will say every time we will determine the price, we will calculate the price because the equipment in it will be old or new. Now, when we came to the meter gauge concept, the meter gauge locos were being thrown away anyway. There was no use for anything. So basically, we were buying a skeleton of the power pack and some other equipment, generator and some motors, etc. So it was far easier to come to a standardized cost and have some predictability in the costing when the locomotive was built. We did not want to go into a situation that we buy a locomotive thinking it will cost us 2 crores and when the final bill comes, it will be 4 crores. So it could be 2.25 crores, yes, but not. So eventually we built our first locomotive like this for about, I think, 2 and 2.
So sorry. So I understand the part of buying the equipment because from a scrap was easier than a working loco.
Sir.
But the rebuilding of from the scrap, that you went to the workshops.
We went to the workshops.
So the workshops had a costing model to do the reconditioning.
Yes, they we bought and gave them a new underframe. We bought from the market a brand new underframe for the chassis. We knew the cost. The meter gauge engine and the meter gauge generator and the meter gauge motors, they had plenty which they had no use for. And they were able to give it to us at some very close to the scrap cost. And they were like, see, in the railways, the lower down that you go, the easier is the decision making. If you went to the railway board for a contract to buy locomotives, it becomes very difficult. So apart from this costing, the fact that we went to a divisional place, a smaller place, a workshop, it was easier to make these decisions.
Sushil, one question I have. In your talk, you mentioned that there are a lot of railway systems outside the railways, the ports, the mines and all. So what you have done at one time for meter gauge locomotives, would RITES consider doing it for broad gauge locomotives? Today, Indian Railways is condemning a lot of broad gauge locomotives left, right and center. And those locomotives reconditioned can be more than useful for these smaller setups, the ports and mines and all, because there the power requirement is not 3,000 horsepower. Even the reduced power requirement is more than adequate. So how do you react to this thought? The railways should go into the business of buying old, condemned, broad gauge locomotives and then do them up and then provide them to all these organizations and also provide service support.
So of course that RITES is doing in a small way. Whatever, the demand is not so huge. But yes, if railways also see it as a business, they can perhaps go along with RITES, and maybe the number from 60 locos can quickly jump up to 100, 150 locos. But the extent of the problem is much, much bigger. The number of locos getting overdue or surplus is far, far bigger. In 2015, I was posted to DMW Patiala. And that time, just before that, I was again in RITES for a while. At that time, Pakistan Railways was facing a huge locomotive shortage. They had some finance problem in buying new locomotives, and their fleet had been run down, etc. There was a delegation from Pakistan. That time, our relations with Pakistan were much better than they are today. And there was a very active discussion to provide, and we were seeing that electrification is going to happen in the country. And there was a proposal to export large number of locomotives to Pakistan. But as luck would have it, 2016 onwards, the situation has totally changed. And we are not on talking terms on anything. So we cannot talk of this.
Sushil, we could consider doing the same for Bangladesh. Bangladesh also has broad gauge system, quite a lot of it. We could export locomotives to them.
I can't speak for RITES in this. RITES export division.
No, you are ex-RITES. We are all bad people. When
Bangladesh is not interested.
Our perception of what we have done in the railways. So it is not a commitment. It is just exchanging thoughts. Yeah.
No. My impression is that Bangladesh is not very keen on old rolling stock. In fact, they sometimes want to go away from dependence on India and look at other suppliers outside India also. So Bangladesh is a different ballgame today. They are not so much dependent on us for anything.
Mr. Mark Hambley wanted to ask something.
If you say that the locomotive price will be 1/3 of what they'll spend elsewhere, and the horsepower and the tractive effort we give is more than adequate for their requirements, it's a question of being able to sell a proposal. Okay.
Absolutely. I agree, sir. I agree. Yeah. I agree.
Mr. Mark Hambley, please.
Sir, thank you very much for your talk. I was interested in the merry-go-round operation that you described. You said it is totally automated. I wondered how is the supervision of that operation? Is there actually still a physical driver to oversee what's happening, or is it a remote control room, please?
No, when I say automatic, it's not really very sophisticated. It's the driver is very much there, and it is the loading unloading is automatic, but right. the train operation is very much manual. And I overstate when I say it's non-stop. It does, of course, stop and go, but the whole process is seamless. So there's not much of automation in the train operation as such.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to make a comment or ask a question?
Well, just to add, I just a couple of days ago had, as part of a study, gone to a cement plant at Rajgangpur. So both one is the industrial siding aspect. Of course, they have 8 sand locomotives, but I think they're pretty old. In fact, the idea that Mr. Surinder Suri is talking about, they probably would be open to upgrade their diesel locomotives for their internal they need, because they don't have lines which are full rake load, and they have to break their trains into parts and then again reassemble before handing over. So I think the idea of using diesel locomotives, though there is a problem. Oh, there is another problem. You see, the curvatures within the siding, I think, are more than what the regular mainline locomotives of the Indian Railways can handle. Whereas the sand locomotives, I think, are able to handle the 400 and 800 horsepower locos, are able to handle the curbs. So that's an issue. Though it's interesting that the wagons are able to handle the curves, I guess. So I think compared to locos. The other aspect, of course, was they had that 10-kilometer narrow gauge section from the limestone mines, which now they have condemned because I think they had to go for higher capacity. And of course, they have a covered conveyor belt,
yes,
which is another form of transportation.
Yes, a lot of people are doing this.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just an interesting, just happened to me a couple of days ago. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to make one observation. See, today when we think of railway heritage or heritage locomotives or vintage locomotives, the steam locomotives comes to mind. But I think in a few years, the diesel locomotive will be in the same position as the steam locomotive is today.
Yes,
so I think your talk has made me think. We should think as rail enthusiasts, we should think even of diesel locomotives as vintage locomotives and heritage locomotives.
Absolutely.
And sort of study them the same way and look at them the same way as we look at steam locomotives. Of course, the diesel locomotive is not as poetic as a steam locomotive, but all the same, a diesel locomotive also deserves a little more interest.
It's definitely more interesting than the electric loco.
Yeah.
That's right, sir.
Can I add some observation?
Please, sir.
This Rajgangpur, I believe that it was a narrow gauge siding, but it was electrified, what we were told. Only in electrified narrow gauge section.
It was electrified, yes. So the one of the electric engines is outside Rourkela station. They have plinth it there.
Okay. Second point, sir, answering Mr. Hambley's query, these locomotives are fitted with a cruise control or what we call a creep control. And once the driver reaches that preset speed, I think it's about 5 kilometers per hour, he just sits back and allows the creep control to take over.
That's right. I should have mentioned
This used to be imported from Vapor Corporation of USA. But then, there was India. So we developed it on our own. Messrs. Medha. Messrs. Medha developed the creep control.
Creep control.
For the locomotive.
I just had
one more question.
Yeah.
Yeah. A diesel locomotive is a diesel electric locomotive. Okay. The diesel engine produces electricity and which runs the traction motors. Since the Indian Railways are condemning diesel locomotive left, right, and center, here's a business proposition for rights or some organization similar to rights. You buy the condemned diesel locomotives from Indian Railways and you produce these diesel generating sets of 1 megawatt or 1.5 megawatts, and you can supply them to the industry or you could even export them. How does Sushil react to this?
So you are aware that the WDM2 locomotive power pack is used as a DG set in many of the railway workshops and more prominently in the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. Right. All their sites have this standby power comes from the Alco 16-cylinder engine power pack DG set.
Right.
But it's a very limited market, and in DG sets now smaller DG sets, Cummins, etc. It's very difficult to compete with them, and especially with silent packaged DG sets. DLW had tried to get into the DG business in a big way some years back, but very difficult to break into this market. It's dominated by private parties and some foreign parties also, and some Indian parties also. Very tough to, because we are very old in the technology. Our technology is very, very poor. And today the market is for packaged silent DG sets, which we are unable to provide.
Okay.
I had a question just on the meter gauge diesel now. Have we covered full ground? That is, either all the locos are condemned or they have been reworked in this nice way that you talked about, or some of them have been plinth heritage. Or so are there still meter gauge diesel locos that need to be dealt with, or
I think there are still a handful. There's still about maybe 50, 60 locomotives. The more recent conversion took place on the North Frontier Railway. And at one go, a large number of diesel locomotives became redundant at that time. And I think very few remain. And they've been thrown away. And they were anyway, because the meter gauge conversion started in the early 80s. And happened very slowly. There was a huge neglect of the fleet. So they were not in very good condition. So as the conversion took place, they all got condemned. So very few remain. I think there are some few meter gauge lines still operational. So just to support them, not many really. I'll get the numbers. I'll try to get the numbers.
Yeah.
Right, then shall we call it a day? I'd like to thank Sushil Luthra for a wonderful talk today, very enlightening. And I think for most of the members, they would be learning about this for the first time of the lesser known railways of India. It is indeed a fascinating study, and I'm glad you touched on this very interesting topic. Many of these sites are worth visiting. For example, I was DRM Dhanbad, and I had actually gone to see the Singrauli, which you had mentioned. They had a really big rail network. And of course, at that time, we were supplementing it with coal from elsewhere. But their merry-go-round system was impressive. So I'd like to thank both the speaker as well as all the participants who have joined us, particularly those who have joined us from overseas. Thank you very much. And we look forward to meeting all of you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.